The lunch rush at Bellini's had finally calmed down, leaving Sophia Reyes a moment to catch her breath. She tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear and glanced at her watch. 3 more hours until her evening shift began. Just enough time to visit her sister at the university library, drop off some homemade food, and make it back before Mr. Giannopoulos started his pre-dinner pep talk. "Table 7 needs their check," called Vivian, balancing a tray of dirty dishes as she bustled past. Sophia nodded, already reaching for her notepad. Table 7 was a pair of businessmen who'd barely looked up from their phones during the entire meal. She'd noticed one of them had barely touched his pasta. "Was everything okay with your meal, sir?" Sophia asked as she approached with the check. The younger man glanced up, seeming surprised someone was speaking to him. "Fine, fine," he said, waving his hand dismissively. The older man, however, frowned. "Actually, the carbonara was too salty. But we're in a rush." "I'm very sorry about that," Sophia said, genuine regret in her voice. "I'll let the kitchen know and I'd be happy to have it removed from your bill." "Don't bother," the man said, sliding his credit card across the table. "Just make it quick." As Sophia processed the payment, she heard the soft jazz playing through the restaurant's speakers shift to a classical piece. Her fingers paused momentarily on the card reader as the notes washed over her. Rachmaninoff, Prelude in G minor. The familiar melody sent a pang through her chest. When she returned with the receipt, the younger businessman had already left for the door, phone pressed to his ear. The older man was signing the bill but glanced up when Sophia placed his card on the table. "You know this piece?" he asked, catching her gaze drifting toward the ceiling speaker. Sophia hesitated. "Yes, Rachmaninoff, it's beautiful." The man raised his eyebrows, studying her with new interest. "It is, not many people your age would recognize it." Sophia smiled politely. "Enjoy the rest of your day, sir." After clearing the table, Sophia headed to the back to grab her bag. The kitchen was still busy preparing for dinner service, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables and sizzle of pans creating its own kind of music. Chef Paolo nodded at her as she passed, his usual gruff acknowledgement that she'd done okay today. Outside, the September air had a slight chill to it, the first hint that summer was truly over. Sophia wrapped her worn jean jacket tighter around herself as she walked the 6 blocks to the subway station. Her feet ached from standing all day, but she'd learned to ignore the pain. The sound of the city, car horns, snippets of conversation, street performers, swirled around her in a familiar urban symphony. The subway was crowded with afternoon commuters, but Sophia managed to find a spot to stand near the door. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rocking of the train soothe her tired mind. The container of lasagna in her bag would make her sister smile, and that thought alone energized her more than any amount of rest. "Sophia," Gabriella called out, waving from behind a stack of textbooks when Sophia entered the university library. Her sister's face lit up, making her look younger than her 19 years. "You didn't have to come all this way. And miss seeing my favorite bookworm?" "Never," Sophia teased, setting down the container. "Homemade lasagna. Eat something besides coffee and vending machine chips, please." Gabriella opened the container, inhaling deeply. "You're an angel." "How was work?" "The usual. Tips were decent." Sophia didn't mention that she'd given half her tips to Mrs. Alvarez downstairs, who was struggling with her rent this month. "How's the study group going?" "We're making progress. Dr. Chen's economics exam is going to be brutal." Sophia glanced at the scattered papers covered with graphs and equations. "You'll ace it." "You always do." "Only because my big sister works herself to the bone to keep me here," Gabriella said quietly, reaching for Sophia's hand. "Hey, none of that." Sophia squeezed her sister's fingers. "That's what family does. And this degree is going to open doors for both of us." Their parents would have been proud of Gabriella, the first in their family to attend college. The thought of their mother and father, killed 3 years ago in a car accident, created a familiar hollow feeling in Sophia's chest. She pushed it away. "No time for that now. I've got to get back for my evening shift," Sophia said, checking her watch. "Some fancy private party tonight. Big tips if we don't mess up." "Don't forget to eat something yourself," Gabriella called as Sophia headed for the door. Back at Bellini's, the restaurant had transformed. White tablecloths replaced the usual cream ones. Crystal glasses sparkled under the dimmed lights, and floral arrangements adorned every table. The staff had changed too, now dressed in crisp black uniforms instead of their usual attire. "There you are," Mr. Giannopoulos said, relief evident in his voice. "This client is very important. Maxwell Stone, the music producer. Very particular about everything." Sophia nodded, straightening her collar. "I'll be perfect," she promised. "You'd better be." "His guests are all VIPs, record executives, musicians, critics. One complaint and we can say goodbye to any future bookings from the industry." The pressure was familiar to Sophia. Every shift carried its own weight of expectations, of rent payments and tuition bills balanced on the edge of a serving tray. The guests began arriving at 7, a parade of expensive clothing and confident smiles. Sophia moved efficiently between tables, filling water glasses and serving appetizers without being noticed. The perfect server, invisible until needed. "More champagne at the center table," the head server directed, and Sophia grabbed a bottle from the ice bucket. As she approached the main table, she got her first good look at Maxwell Stone. He wasn't what she'd expected. Instead of a flashy, loud music executive, he was understated in a simple black suit, with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. He was mid-conversation with a woman in a red dress, something about a new jazz fusion album. "The pianist is technically skilled, but there's no soul in the performance," Maxwell was saying as Sophia carefully filled his glass. "It's all mechanics, no emotion. Like watching someone solve a math problem rather than create art." The woman nodded. "That's what happens when they push these prodigies too hard, too young. They burn out. Or worse, they never truly catch fire in the first place," Maxwell replied. "All that training, but the spark isn't there." Sophia moved around the table, filling glasses without interrupting the conversation. The background music shifted to a quiet piano piece that made her hand tremble slightly as she poured. "Careful," Maxwell said sharply, as a few drops of champagne splashed onto the tablecloth. "I'm sorry, sir," Sophia said, quickly dabbing at the drops with her napkin. He waved his hand dismissively, turning back to his conversation. But when Sophia stepped away, she heard him say, "Now this is music with soul. Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9, No. 2. Beautiful but terribly overplayed." Sophia paused just for a heartbeat. It wasn't Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9, No. 2. It was Opera 48, No. 1 in C minor. Similar opening, but entirely different emotional landscape. The mistake surprised her, coming from someone so critical about music. She should have kept walking. Should have stayed invisible, but the words slipped out before she could stop them. "It's actually Nocturne Op. 48, No. 1, she said, then immediately bit her lip. The table fell silent. Maxwell turned his head slowly, eyebrows raised in surprise or perhaps indignation. "Excuse me?" Sophia's cheeks burned. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken. It's Op. 48, No. 1, in C minor." The woman in the red dress looked embarrassed for Sophia. Another guest smirked, clearly enjoying the awkward moment. Maxwell studied Sophia with narrowed eyes. "You're certain of that?" he asked. Sophia nodded, wishing she could disappear. "Yes, sir." Maxwell pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then looked at the screen. His expression changed from annoyance to curiosity. "She's right," he said, showing his phone to the table. "Option 48, No. 1. He looked up at Sophia with new interest. "How does a server at Bellini's recognize Chopin by ear? And correct me, no less?" Sophia swallowed hard. "I used to listen to a lot of classical music," she said vaguely. "Would anyone like more bread?" But Maxwell wasn't ready to let the subject drop. "What's your name?" "Sophia, sir." "Well, Sophia, I'm impressed. Not many people would recognize the difference, let alone have the courage to correct me." His tone was hard to read, somewhere between amused and challenging. "I really should get back to work," Sophia said, gesturing toward the kitchen. Maxwell nodded, but as she turned to leave, he called after her. "You've made this dinner more interesting. Sophia, I'll be watching you." Back in the kitchen, Vivian grabbed her arm. "What happened?" "Stone looked like he was grilling you." Sophia shook her head. "Nothing. Just a mix-up with the champagne." For the rest of the evening, Sophia felt Maxwell's eyes following her as she worked. Once, when she glanced in his direction, he raised his glass in a small salute that made her stomach knot. She couldn't tell if she'd impressed him or made an enemy. As the night progressed, Sophia overheard fragments of conversation, record deals being discussed, artists being critiqued, millions of dollars mentioned casually over dessert. It was a different world from her tiny apartment with its leaky faucet and the pile of bills on the kitchen table. When the party finally ended and the last guest had left, Mr. Giannopoulos called Sophia to his office. "Mr. Stone left this for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a $100 bill and a business card with Maxwell Stone's name and contact information. On the back, a handwritten note, "For the music lesson. Perhaps there's more to you than meets the eye." Sophia stared at the card, a mix of emotions washing over her. Pride that she'd been right about the music, embarrassment that she'd spoken up, and something else, a tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. A reminder of who she used to be before life had forced her to set aside her dreams. She slipped the card into her pocket. Tomorrow would be another double shift, another day of bills and responsibilities. But for now, Chopin's Nocturne played in her mind as she stepped out into the night, her fingers unconsciously moving to the remembered notes as she walked home through the quiet streets. 2 weeks passed, and Sophia almost forgot about her encounter with Maxwell Stone. Almost. His business card sat in her jewelry box, the only place in their small apartment where she kept things that mattered. Sometimes, when she couldn't sleep, she'd take it out and run her fingers over the embossed letters, wondering what might have happened if her life had taken a different turn. But daydreams didn't pay the rent. October brought colder weather and higher heating bills. Sophia picked up extra shifts at Bellini's and started weekend mornings at a coffee shop 6 blocks away. The manager, a kind-eyed woman named Rita, let her take home the day-old pastries that would otherwise be thrown out. "You look tired, honey," Rita said one Sunday as Sophia wiped down the counters at closing time. "You working yourself too hard." Sophia forced a smile. "Just until Gabriella's midterms are over. She's stressing about her grades. All you do is work and worry about your sister. When's the last time you did something for yourself?" The question caught Sophia off guard. I don't know. It doesn't matter." Rita shook her head. "Everyone needs something that makes their heart sing. Otherwise, what's the point?" Sophia's mind drifted to the dusty upright piano in Mrs. Alvarez's apartment downstairs. Sometimes when Sophia helped the elderly woman with her groceries, she'd see it sitting in the corner untouched for years. Her fingers would itch to brush against the keys, but she always held back. Opening that door meant facing everything she'd left behind. "Maybe someday," Sophia said, hanging up her apron. When she arrived at Bellini's for her evening shift the next day, Mr. Giannopoulos was waiting for her, his face more serious than usual. "Sophia, good, you're here. I need to speak with you," he said, ushering her into his cramped office. "We've been asked to provide staff for a private event this Saturday." Sophia nodded. "Okay, I can work it. It's at Maxwell Stone's penthouse." Mr. Giannopoulos watched her reaction carefully. "He specifically requested you." Sophia's heart skipped. "Me? Why?" "I don't ask why rich people do anything. I just say yes and charge them extra," he replied with a shrug. "It's good money, double your usual rate plus tips. But if you're uncomfortable—" "No, I'll do it," Sophia said quickly. With Gabriella's textbooks for next semester already costing more than expected, she couldn't afford to turn down good money. Saturday arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that seemed determined to dampen more than just the streets. Sophia stood in front of her small bathroom mirror, applying mascara with a steady hand. She looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep alone couldn't fix. But her uniform was pressed, her hair neatly braided, and she'd even found time to polish her sensible black shoes. Gabriella poked her head around the bathroom door. "You look nice. Going somewhere special?" "Just a catering job. Fancy apartment uptown," Sophia replied, closing the mascara tube. "You've been working every weekend for months," Gabriella said, guilt evident in her voice. "You should be out with friends having fun." Sophia squeezed her sister's shoulder as she passed. "I have plenty of time for fun. Don't worry about me." The truth was, Sophia had gradually lost touch with most of her friends over the past 3 years. Between work and taking care of Gabriella, there was little time for anything else. The friends she'd had at Juilliard had moved on, becoming successful musicians while she served drinks and cleaned tables. Maxwell Stone's building was exactly as imposing as Sophia had imagined, all gleaming glass and uniformed doormen. She showed her ID at the security desk and was directed to the service elevator. "Floor 37, the guard said, barely looking up from his computer. The service elevator was plain compared to the marble-floored lobby, but still nicer than any elevator in Sophia's neighborhood. When the doors opened on the 37th floor, she was greeted by a harried-looking event coordinator with a clipboard. "You're from Bellini's? Good. Through here to get changed, then report to the kitchen for your station assignment." The staff changing area had been set up in what appeared to be a home office, with servers squeezing between a large desk and bookshelves to hang their coats. Sophia changed into the uniform provided, black pants and a crisp white button-down with a black bow tie, and followed the sounds of activity to the kitchen. The kitchen was a flurry of activity, with chefs in white coats preparing delicate appetizers and bartenders mixing colorful cocktails. Sophia was assigned to tray service, circulating with drinks and hors d'oeuvres among the guests. "Remember, these are important people," the coordinator warned. "Be invisible, be efficient, and never empty-handed. Always be carrying either full glasses or empty ones." Sophia nodded, accepting a tray of champagne flutes. This was nothing new. She'd mastered the art of moving unnoticed through crowds, anticipating needs before they were voiced. As she entered the main living area, Sophia had to work hard to keep her jaw from dropping. The penthouse was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights coming alive as dusk fell. Modern art hung on walls painted in soft neutral tones, and sleek furniture grouped in conversation areas seemed to invite guests to linger. But what caught Sophia's eye, what made her heart stutter in her chest, was the piano. Not just any piano. A Steinway concert grand in gleaming black, positioned near the windows where the city served as its backdrop. It sat there like a sleeping giant, lid raised, waiting for someone worthy to wake it. "Champagne?" Sophia offered to a couple near the entrance, tearing her eyes away from the instrument. The party filled quickly with beautiful people in expensive clothes, their laughter mixing with the soft jazz played by a trio in the corner. Sophia moved efficiently through the crowd, keeping glasses filled and collecting empty ones, all while trying not to look at the piano. An hour into the event, she spotted Maxwell Stone. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months, talking animatedly with a small group near the bar. He hadn't noticed her yet. "More spring rolls for the group by the windows," a voice directed, and Sophia headed to the kitchen to refill her tray. When she returned, Maxwell was standing nearer to the piano, deep in conversation with a tall woman in a silver dress who kept touching his arm as she spoke. Sophia tried to skirt around them, but as she passed, Maxwell's eyes flicked toward her, recognition dawning on his face. "Ah, it's my musical waitress," he called out loud enough to make several people turn. "Sophia, isn't it?" Sophia froze, tray balanced carefully in her hands. "Yes, sir. Would you like a spring roll?" Maxwell laughed, the sound drawing more attention. "Always the professional. Tell me, Sophia, have you been correcting anyone else's musical knowledge lately?" Heat crept up her neck. "No, sir. I apologize again for speaking out of turn that night." "Don't apologize. I admire people who know what they're talking about." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Diane Fletcher, director of the Manhattan Symphony. Diane, this is the young woman I told you about, the one who schooled me on Chopin." The woman assessed Sophia with cool interest. "How unexpected. Are you a music student?" "No, ma'am," Sophia replied, painfully aware of the curious gazes now directed her way. "But you know your classical music," Maxwell pressed. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "I just have a good ear." "A good ear," Maxwell repeated as if testing the weight of her modest claim. His eyes drifted to the piano, then back to Sophia, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Do you play, Sophia?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Several nearby conversations had quieted as people tuned into the exchange. "I should get back to work," Sophia said, taking a step back. But Maxwell wasn't done with her. He took a spring roll from her tray and bit into it, never breaking eye contact. "You know, I've been thinking about you since that night at Bellini's. A server with an ear for Chopin. It's an interesting puzzle." Sophia said nothing, hoping he would lose interest if she didn't engage. "That piano," Maxwell continued, gesturing with his half-eaten spring roll, "is a Steinway Model D. Cost me more than most people's homes. The same model used in Carnegie Hall." More guests had drifted over, drawn by Maxwell's theatrical tone. "The funny thing about expensive pianos," he went on, "is that they're wasted on mediocre players. It's like giving a Ferrari to someone who can't drive stick." A ripple of laughter moved through the growing audience. Sophia's hands tightened on her tray. "I had a pianist scheduled to entertain tonight, but he canceled last minute. Something about his agent booking him for 2 events at once. Maxwell shook his head in mock disappointment. So there it sits, lonely and silent. Sophia's eyes betrayed her, darting once more to the magnificent instrument. Maxwell caught the look and his smile widened. "I'll make you a deal, Sophia," he said, taking a champagne flute from another passing server and raising it slightly. "Play something for us, anything at all, and I'll donate $10,000 to the charity of your choice." A murmur ran through the crowd. Diane Fletcher raised an eyebrow. "That's very generous, Mr. Stone, but I'm working," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm paying for the catering. Consider this part of your job tonight." He turned to the crowd. "Wouldn't we all prefer some live music to these recorded tracks?" Sounds of agreement rose from the onlookers. Sophia felt trapped, cornered by wealth and privilege in a way that made her feel small. "Perhaps the young lady doesn't actually play," suggested a man near the back, his tone dismissive. "All talk, no skill." Sophia's cheeks burned. She looked around at the faces watching her, some curious, some amused, some already losing interest in the little drama. These people would forget her the moment she walked away. To them, she was just entertainment, a brief diversion at a fancy party. But the piano called to her. 3 years since she'd last touched a keyboard. 3 years of silence, of burying that part of herself so deeply she sometimes forgot it existed. $10,000? She asked quietly. Maxwell nodded. To any legitimate charity. Think of the good it could do. Sophia thought of the community music program that had given her her first lessons as a child, before the scholarships to better schools had come, the program that had been struggling for funding the last time she'd checked. Slowly, she handed her tray to a startled fellow server. The crowd parted as she walked toward the piano, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She felt like she was moving through a dream, or perhaps toward the edge of a cliff. The piano bench was cool and smooth beneath her as she sat down. Sophia stared at the keys, ivory and ebony, stretching out before her like a road home. "Well?" Maxwell prompted, now standing near the curve of the grand piano, champagne in hand and triumph in his eyes. "Dazzle us, waitress!" Sophia placed her hands on the keys and hesitated. What if she'd lost it? What if 3 years of silence had taken away the one thing that had once defined her? The room waited, the collective anticipation almost palpable. Sophia closed her eyes and remembered. Sophia's fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. The silence in the room pressed against her, heavy with expectation. Maxwell stood nearby, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He thought he had won, had found a way to humiliate the waitress who had dared to correct him 3 years. It had been 3 years since she last played. Sophia closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. She thought of her parents, her father who had worked double shifts to pay for her lessons, her mother who had sat beside her during every practice session, notebook in hand, to write down the teacher's instructions. They had believed in her talent long before anyone else. She thought of Gabriella, studying late into the night, determined to make something of herself, determined not to waste the chance their parents had given them both. Sophia opened her eyes. The keys gleamed under the soft lighting, waiting. She began to play. The first few notes were hesitant, her muscles remembering an old language, rusty but not forgotten. She started with something simple. Bach's Prelude in C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Basic, foundational. The piece every piano student learned early in their journey. Sophia's fingers grew more confident with each measure, the familiar pattern flowing from muscle memory. It wasn't a showy piece, but its steady rhythm calmed her racing heart. The room remained quiet, watching, waiting. Someone near the back whispered, "Is that it, Bach?" Another replied, "Seems rather elementary." Sophia heard them but didn't stop. The Bach was just her warm-up, a way to reacquaint herself with the feel of a real piano again. As the final notes of the prelude faded, she paused for just a moment, then, without announcing her choice, Sophia launched into Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor. Specifically, the cadenza from the first movement, widely considered one of the most technically challenging pieces in the classical repertoire. The change was instant and dramatic. The gentle Bach prelude had been a trickle of water. This was a tsunami. Her fingers flew across the keys with astonishing speed and precision. The complex harmonies and thunderous chords filled the penthouse. bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows and washing over the stunned guests. Sophia felt something break open inside her, like a dam giving way. 3 years of suppressed passion came pouring out through her fingertips. The magnificent Steinway responded to her touch as if it had been waiting for her, its rich, resonant tone filling every corner of the room. She forgot the audience, forgot Maxwell and his dare, forgot the borrowed uniform and the years of serving drinks to pay bills. There was only the music, the beautiful, complicated, soul-stirring music that had once been the center of her world. Sophia's body swayed with the crescendos, her face transformed by the intensity of her focus. This wasn't just playing. This was communion. The piece required not just technical brilliance but emotional depth, and Sophia held nothing back. Every frustration, every sacrifice, every moment of grief and hope, all of it poured into Rachmaninoff's demanding composition. As she navigated the most difficult passage, a series of rapid arpeggios that few pianists could execute cleanly, a small gasp rippled through the crowd. Maxwell's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by an expression of disbelief. When Sophia finally struck the final chord, the room remained absolutely silent for 3 heartbeats. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the space her music had just occupied. Sophia remained seated at the piano, slightly dazed, her breathing uneven. She hadn't played like that since, well, she wasn't sure she had ever played quite like that. Not even at her final recital at Juilliard before she'd had to leave. Maxwell approached the piano slowly, as if approaching a wild animal he wasn't sure how to handle. "That was Rachmaninoff's third," he said, his voice missing its earlier cockiness. "The cadenza." Sophia nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. "That's one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written." It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded again anyway. The crowd had gathered closer now, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine awe. Diane Fletcher, the symphony director, pushed her way to the front. "Where did you study?" she asked, her professional composure slipping to reveal raw curiosity. Sophia finally found her voice, though it came out quieter than she intended. "Juilliard? For 2 years." A murmur ran through the onlookers. Maxwell's eyebrows shot up. "Juilliard? And now you're serving canapes at Bellini's?" He sounded almost offended, as if her career path were a personal insult to him. Sophia stood up from the piano bench, suddenly aware again of her server's uniform, of the role she was meant to be playing at this party. "Life happens, Mr. Stone. Sometimes we don't get to choose our path." "Play something else," called a voice from the crowd. Others echoed the request, faces eager and attentive where before they had barely registered her existence. Sophia looked to Maxwell, whose expression had shifted to something more calculating. "The night is young," he said, "and I believe we had an agreement, $10,000 to the charity of your choice." "Community Music Works," Sophia said without hesitation. "They provide free music education to kids who can't afford lessons." Maxwell nodded, pulling out his phone. "Consider it done. Now, please, another piece." Sophia hesitated, then sat back down at the piano. The room quieted again, but this time with reverence rather than condescension. She chose Chopin, not one of his more famous pieces, but his Ballad No. 4 in F minor. It was a piece that began gently, almost conversationally before building to an emotionally turbulent conclusion. As she played, Sophia noticed Diane Fletcher watching her intently, occasionally whispering to a man beside her who nodded in response. Near the bar, a young woman was filming on her phone, while beside her, an older gentleman in an expensive suit watched with eyes that glistened suspiciously. Sophia lost herself in the music once more, letting the familiar notes carry her away from the penthouse, away from the years of struggle, away from the grief that had become her constant companion. For these few minutes she was just a musician again, not a waitress, not a surrogate parent, not a bill payer or a shift worker. Just Sophia, the pianist. When she finished the Chopin, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Before she could stand, a young man approached with a glass of water, offering it with a respectful nod. Sophia accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was. "That was unexpected," Maxwell said, joining her again by the piano. Gone was the mocking tone, replaced by genuine respect. "You're full of surprises, Sophia Reyes. Thank you for the opportunity." "Mr. Stone," she replied carefully, unsure of his intentions. Maxwell, please. He gestured to the crowd, which had broken into excited conversation. You've made quite an impression. Tell me, why did you leave Juilliard? Clearly it wasn't for lack of talent. The question stabbed at an old wound. Sophia took a sip of water, buying herself a moment. My parents died, she said finally, keeping her voice steady. Car accident. I had a 16-year-old sister to take care of, bills to pay, no other family to help. Music doesn't pay the rent when you're still a student. Maxwell's face softened with something like genuine sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Truly. Diane Fletcher approached, extending her hand to Sophia. Ms. Reyes, I'm Diane Fletcher, director of the Manhattan Symphony. Your playing is remarkable, especially considering you haven't played in how long? 3 years, Sophia admitted, shaking the woman's hand. Today is the first time since I left school. Diane's eyebrows rose in surprise. 3 years? Without practicing? And you play Rachmaninoff's Third like that? She shook her head in disbelief. That's not just training. That's a gift. Sophia felt warmth rising to her cheeks. Thank you. Do you have a card? Diane asked. I'd like to continue this conversation. Sophia almost laughed. I'm afraid waitresses don't usually carry business cards. Here, Maxwell interjected, handing Sophia his phone. Put your number in. I'll make sure Diane gets it. His tone had lost its edge entirely, replaced by what sounded like genuine interest. As Sophia entered her contact information, she noticed the catering manager watching from across the room, clearly unsure whether to be annoyed that she had abandoned her duties or impressed that she was now socializing with the host. Maxwell followed her gaze and smiled. Don't worry about him. As far as I'm concerned, you're a guest now, not staff. He raised his voice slightly. In fact, everyone, I'd like to introduce Sophia Reyes, formerly of Juilliard, who has just given us the privilege of a private concert. A smattering of applause followed his announcement. Sophia felt strangely disoriented, caught between two worlds. The service world she'd inhabited for the past 3 years and the musical world she'd left behind. An older woman in an emerald dress approached, her eyes bright with interest. My dear, that was splendid. Tell me, do you teach? My granddaughter is looking for a piano instructor, and after what I've just heard... Before Sophia could answer, another guest joined them, then another. Questions came from all directions. Where had she studied before Juilliard? Who were her teachers? Did she perform anywhere currently? Sophia answered as best she could, increasingly overwhelmed by the attention. For years she had moved through life trying not to be noticed, doing her job efficiently and invisibly. Now suddenly all eyes were on her, not as someone serving them, but as someone they wanted to know. In a quiet moment, when the crowd around her had temporarily thinned, Maxwell reappeared at her side. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice low. I thought I was setting you up for embarrassment. I didn't expect. He gestured vaguely at the piano. Sophia studied his face, trying to gauge his sincerity. Why did you do it? The dare? Maxwell considered the question. Honestly, I thought you were bluffing that night at Bellini's. The waitress who supposedly knows her Chopin, I wanted to see if you'd fold when challenged. He shrugged. I was wrong. It happens rarely, but I can admit when it does. Before Sophia could respond, Diane Fletcher returned, this time accompanied by a distinguished-looking man with silver hair. Sophia, I'd like you to meet Robert Chen, our principal donor and chairman of the board, Diane said. Robert, this is the pianist I was telling you about. Robert Chen extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. Ms. Reyes, your playing is extraordinary. I understand you've been away from the piano for some time? Sophia nodded. Yes, sir. A shame, he said, glancing at Diane. Talent like yours shouldn't be serving drinks. It should be serving music. Diane nodded in agreement. Sophia, we should properly talk about your future. Would you be free for lunch next week? Sophia blinked, sure she had misheard. My future? Yes, Diane said simply. I believe it might be time for you to return to music. If you're interested, of course. Sophia looked from Diane to Robert to Maxwell, then back to the piano that had changed everything in the span of 15 minutes. Yes, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. I'm interested. Sophia's hands trembled as she climbed the steps to her apartment building. The night air was cool against her flushed cheeks, but she barely noticed. Her mind was still at Maxwell Stone's penthouse, still feeling the smooth ivory keys beneath her fingers, still hearing the applause that had followed her performance. The clock on her phone read 2:17 a.m. Maxwell had insisted she stay until the party ended, introducing her to what felt like every influential person in the New York music scene. Business cards filled her pockets, producers, music teachers, patrons of the arts. Diane Fletcher had put her personal number in Sophia's phone, making her promise to call tomorrow about that lunch meeting. "You shouldn't be waiting tables," Diane had said firmly. "Not with your gift." Sophia unlocked her apartment door as quietly as possible, not wanting to wake Gabriella. But as she stepped inside, she found her sister sitting at their small kitchen table, textbooks spread out around her, a half-empty mug of cold coffee beside her laptop. "You're still up?" Sophia asked, setting down her bag. Gabriella looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Big test tomorrow." "How was the fancy party?" Sophia slipped off her shoes, unsure how to answer. How could she possibly explain what had happened tonight? It was unexpected. Rich people being snobs? Gabriella asked with a tired smile. Actually, no. Sophia pulled out a chair and sat across from her sister. "Something happened, Gabby, something big." Gabriella closed her laptop, suddenly alert. "What's wrong? Did you get fired?" "No, nothing like that." Sophia took a deep breath. "I played the piano tonight." Gabriella's eyes widened. "You played? After all this time?" Sophia nodded. "The host had this amazing Steinway. He dared me to play, thought I was bluffing about knowing music. So I did. And?" Gabriella leaned forward. "And they liked it." Sophia's voice cracked slightly. "The director of the Manhattan Symphony was there. She wants to meet with me about my future in music." Gabriella's face lit up with a joy Sophia hadn't seen in years. "Sophie, that's incredible." She jumped up and hugged her sister tightly. "I've been telling you for ages that you should play again." Sophia returned the hug, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "It's probably nothing. Just talk." Gabriella pulled back, her hands on Sophia's shoulders. "Don't do that. Don't dismiss this before it even happens." Her voice grew serious. "You gave up everything for me after Mom and Dad died, everything. Your dreams, your education, you're my sister," Sophia said simply. "Family comes first." "And you're my sister," Gabriella countered. "Your happiness matters to me." She gestured around their small apartment. "You've put your life on hold for 3 years. Maybe it's time to unpause it." Sophia felt a flutter of hope, quickly followed by practical concerns. "Even if something comes of this meeting, lessons, an audition, whatever, I'd still need to work." "We still have bills, your tuition." "I can get a job," Gabriella interrupted. "I've been thinking about it anyway. The library is hiring student assistants and there's a weekend position at the campus bookstore. But your studies, will be fine," Gabriella finished firmly. "I'm not 16 anymore, Sophie. Let me help carry the load." She smiled, squeezing her sister's hand. "Besides, think how good it will look on my resume, working my way through college. Very character building." Sophia laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she had truly laughed? "You sound like Dad." "Good," Gabriella said. "Someone needs to talk sense into you." Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Maxwell Stone. Hope you got home safely. I've set up a meeting with Anton Visser from the Philharmonic tomorrow at 2 p.m. at my office. He's very interested in meeting you. Let me know if you can make it." Sophia stared at the screen. Anton Visser, the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. One of the most respected names in classical music. "What is it?" Gabriella asked, noticing her expression. Sophia handed her the phone. Gabriella read the message and looked up, her eyes wide. "The Philharmonic? Sophie, this is happening. This is really happening." Sophia took back the phone, anxiety mingling with excitement. "I'd have to get someone to cover my shift at Bellini's tomorrow. And I have nothing to wear to a meeting like this. And I haven't practiced in years. One good night doesn't make up for that." "And stop," Gabriella said, putting a finger to Sophia's lips. "Just stop. For once in your life, let something good happen, without looking for all the reasons it might fall apart." Sophia fell silent, her sister's words sinking in. Had she become so accustomed to struggle that she couldn't recognize opportunity when it knocked? "Okay," she said finally. "I'll text him back. I'll go to the meeting." "Good," Gabriella said with satisfaction. "Now help me with this economics problem set so we can both get some sleep." The next morning arrived with golden autumn sunlight streaming through their kitchen window. Sophia had managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, but adrenaline kept her alert as she called Mr. Giannopoulos to request the afternoon off. "You were the talk of the party," he said, surprising her. "Mr. Stone called personally to tell me what happened. Take the whole day paid? And Sophia? I'm proud of you, kid." Sophia hung up, slightly dazed. Everything was moving so quickly. A knock at their door revealed Mrs. Alvarez, their downstairs neighbor, holding a garment bag. "Sophia, dear, I heard you played piano at some fancy party last night. The whole building is talking about it." The elderly woman beamed. "I brought something that might help with your meeting today." Sophia let her in, wondering how news had traveled so fast. Mrs. Alvarez unzipped the bag to reveal a beautifully tailored navy blue dress, simple but elegant. "This was my daughter's," she explained, "from when she worked in the corporate world before moving to California. I think it will fit you." Sophia touched the fabric gently. "Mrs. Alvarez, I can't possibly—" "Nonsense," the woman interrupted. "It's been hanging in my closet for years. Better you wear it than the moths." Her eyes softened. "My Teresa gave up the piano when she was young. Too much pressure," she said. "Always regretted it." "Don't make the same mistake." Sophia found herself hugging the older woman, overwhelmed by her kindness. "Thank you. Just invite me to your first concert," Mrs. Alvarez said with a wink. By 1:30 p.m., Sophia stood outside a gleaming office building in Midtown, wearing Mrs. Alvarez's dress and a pair of borrowed heels from Gabriela. She had spent the morning practicing on Mrs. Alvarez's piano downstairs, her fingers remembering more with each hour. "Sophia," Maxwell called as she entered the lobby. He looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more human. "Right on time. Come up, Visser just arrived." In the elevator, Maxwell studied her with open curiosity. "I've been thinking about last night," he said. "The way you played Rachmaninoff after 3 years away from the piano." He shook his head. "Do you understand how extraordinary that is?" Sophia looked down at her hands. "I was rusty. The runs in the middle section weren't clean." Maxwell laughed. "And that's exactly why you're here. A true musician, never satisfied, always hearing the flaws no one else notices." The elevator doors opened. "Visser is going to love you." Anton Visser was not what Sophia expected. Instead of a stern European maestro, she found a cheerful man in his 50s with kind eyes and a quick smile. He stood to greet her as Maxwell made the introductions. "Ms. Reyes," he said warmly. "Maxwell has told me about your performance last night. Quite the dramatic revelation." Sophia shook his hand. It was unexpected for everyone involved, myself included. They settled into comfortable chairs in Maxwell's office, which featured yet another piano, this one a smaller grand tucked into the corner. "Tell me about your background," Visser said. Getting straight to the point, Sophia told her story, her childhood lessons, the community music program that had first spotted her talent, the scholarships Juilliard, and then the accident that had changed everything. "So you haven't played at all in 3 years?" Visser asked, his expression thoughtful. "No, sir. Until last night." Visser exchanged a glance with Maxwell. "And yet you could still play Rachmaninoff's third from memory." It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded anyway. "I'd like to hear you play," Visser said. Gesturing to the piano, Sophia's heart raced. But she stood and moved to the instrument. This was what she had practiced for this morning, a chance to prove that last night wasn't a fluke, that the music was still inside her. She chose Beethoven's Sonata No. 8, Pathétique. The piece spoke of struggle and perseverance, of darkness giving way to determined hope. Sophia felt it matched her own journey. She played with more confidence than the night before, more clarity. Her practice session that morning had helped shake off more of the rust, allowing her fingers to find their old precision. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Visser's expression was unreadable. "You need a teacher," he said finally, "to help you recover what was lost in these 3 years away from music. But the foundation, the gift, is undeniable." He leaned forward. "The Philharmonic has a fellowship program for exceptional talents. It includes lessons with our principal pianist, participation in master classes, and eventually, performance opportunities. There's a stipend as well, not enough to live on in New York, but something to help." Sophia stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You're offering me a place in this program? Without an audition?" Visser smiled. "This was your audition, Ms. Reyes, and last night was your recommendation from 2 people I trust." He glanced at Maxwell. Though I admit when Maxwell called me this morning raving about a waitress who played Rachmaninoff, I was skeptical. I don't know what to say, Sophia whispered. Say yes, Maxwell suggested. The program starts in January, Visser continued. That gives you 3 months to prepare. I'll arrange for you to start lessons immediately with Maria Gutierrez. She's a brilliant teacher who specializes in helping pianists overcome technical challenges. Sophia's mind raced. 3 months. Time to practice, to rebuild her skills, to find a way to balance this opportunity with her responsibilities. The fellowship includes 10 hours of work per week in our administrative offices, Visser added, as if reading her thoughts. Many of our fellows find it helpful to maintain another part-time job as well. I'll need to keep working at the restaurant, Sophia said. At least part-time. I support my sister. Of course, Visser nodded. We understand that our fellows are real people with real lives. The schedule can accommodate that. He stood, extending his hand again. Welcome to the Philharmonic family, Ms. Reyes. Pending your acceptance, of course. Sophia took his hand, her own still trembling slightly. I accept. Thank you. After Visser left, Sophia remained with Maxwell, still processing everything that had happened. Why are you doing this? She asked finally. You barely know me. Maxwell was quiet for a moment. My mother was a pianist, he said eventually. Not professionally, she taught elementary school music, but she played beautifully. He looked out the window at the city skyline. She never had the opportunities her talent deserved. When I saw you play last night, I saw someone who deserves a chance. Sophia studied his face, seeing sincerity where she had expected calculation. Thank you, she said simply. Maxwell smiled. Don't thank me yet. The hard work is just beginning. Getting back to where you were, then pushing beyond it won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Sophia replied. True. Maxwell handed her a business card, different from the one he'd given her at Bellini's. This one had his personal number. If you need anything, advice, connections, even just someone to talk to who understands the music world, call me. Sophia took the card, overwhelmed by the events of the past 24 hours. Yesterday she had been a waitress with a hidden past. Today she was a pianist with a possible future. I should go, she said. I need to tell my sister. Of course. Maxwell walked her to the elevator. Sophia, one more thing. She turned, eyebrows raised in question. When you make your debut with the Philharmonic, because you will, save me a ticket in the front row. Sophia smiled. A real, uninhibited smile that reached her eyes. Deal. As the elevator doors closed, Sophia allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just the day-to-day hope of making rent or having enough for Gabriella's textbooks, but the expansive hope of dreams rekindled. Of music filling her life again. The journey wouldn't be easy. She would still have bills to pay, still have responsibilities, but for the first time in 3 years, Sophia could see a path forward that included both survival and joy. She stepped out into the bright autumn afternoon, her heart lighter than it had been since the day her parents died. It was time to call Gabriella, time to tell her that life was about to change, time to start playing again. 6 months later, Sophia stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Through the heavy curtain she could hear the murmur of the audience filing in, the occasional cough or laugh cutting through the general hum of conversation. Nervous? Maria Gutierrez asked, appearing beside her. The piano teacher had become both mentor and friend during the intense months of preparation. Sophia managed a shaky smile. Terrified might be more accurate. Maria squeezed her shoulder. Good. A little fear keeps us honest. She straightened Sophia's dark blue concert dress, a gift from Diane Fletcher, who had become another champion of Sophia's renewed musical career. Remember what we practiced. Breathe between movements. Connect with the music before you begin. And trust myself, Sophia finished. I know. The past 6 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of Sophia's life. After accepting the Philharmonic Fellowship, she had cut back to weekend shifts at Bellini's and begun an intensive regimen of practice and study. 5 hours of piano daily, plus music theory classes to refresh what she had forgotten, and private lessons with Maria twice a week. There had been moments of doubt, times when her fingers wouldn't cooperate, when the music seemed to slip away from her, when the years of absence felt like an insurmountable gap. But there had also been breakthroughs. The day she finally mastered a particularly difficult passage in Liszt, the first time she played through an entire concerto without stopping, the morning she woke up and realized her hands no longer ached from practicing. Gabriella had kept her promise, finding work at the university library and taking on a weekend job at a local bookstore. Their roles had shifted. Now they supported each other, partners rather than one bearing all the responsibility. 10 minutes, called the stage manager, bringing Sophia back to the present. She peeked through the curtain. The concert hall was filling up quickly. This wasn't her solo debut. That would come later if tonight went well. Tonight she was performing as part of the Young Artists Showcase, playing the first movement of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. On with the Philharmonic. 3 other fellows would perform other movements from various concertos. A taste of what might come. Sophia scanned the audience, looking for familiar faces. Gabriella would be there, of course, sitting with Mrs. Alvarez and Rita from the coffee shop. Mr. Giannopoulos had bought tickets for himself and several of the Bellini staff. And somewhere in the front row, there, Maxwell Stone, just as he had promised, sitting beside Diane Fletcher. He caught her eye through the curtain and gave a small nod of encouragement. So much had changed since that night in his penthouse. Sophia now spent her mornings practicing at the Philharmonic's rehearsal spaces and afternoons working in their administrative offices. Evenings were split between Bellini's and home, where she had installed a digital piano with weighted keys, a gift from the fellowship program. Maxwell had become a regular presence in her new life, showing up at lessons occasionally or inviting her to small gatherings where she could meet other musicians. Never pushing, never taking credit, just opening doors and stepping aside to let her walk through them. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. Sophia stepped back from the curtain and closed her eyes, trying to center herself. Tonight mattered. Representatives from record labels would be here. Critics, potential sponsors, people who could help her build a real career. A text message notification lit up her phone screen, from Gabriella. No matter what happens, I'm so proud of you. You've already won just by being on that stage. Love you, sis. Sophia smiled, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Gabriella was right. After everything, the loss of their parents, the abandonment of her dreams, the years of struggle, standing on this stage was already a victory. Places, please, the stage manager called. Sophia moved to her position in the wings. The concertmaster came on stage to tune the orchestra, followed by the conductor Anton Visser, who had taken a personal interest in Sophia's progress. The audience applauded as he bowed and turned to the orchestra. After a brief introduction, Visser announced the first performer, Sophia. This was it. No turning back. She walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The applause seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sophia approached the gleaming grand piano at center stage, bowed to the audience, then to Visser before sitting down and adjusting the bench. For a moment she was gripped by panic. What if she forgot the music? What if her fingers froze? What if these past 6 months had been a fluke, a temporary return of something permanently lost? Then she saw Maxwell in the front row, his expression confident. Beside him, Diane nodded encouragingly, and a few rows back, Gabriella's face shone with pride. Sophia placed her hands on the keys. She took a deep breath, remembering Maria's advice. Connect with the music. Trust yourself. Visser raised his baton. The orchestra began the dramatic opening of Tchaikovsky's concerto. Sophia's entrance was coming, those famous, powerful chords that opened the piano part, and then she was playing, her fingers striking the keys with precision and passion. The Carby, months of practice paid off as muscle memory took over, allowing her mind to focus on the emotional content of the music, rather than the technical challenges. The concerto's first movement told a story, of struggle and triumph, of darkness and light, of a journey through difficulty toward beauty. It was, Sophia realized, not unlike her own story. As she played the final triumphant passage, Sophia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the pure, overwhelming joy of being exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was born to do. The final chord rang out, hanging in the air for a perfect moment before the audience erupted in applause. Sophia stood slightly dazed to take her bow. The sound washed over her like a wave. Approval, appreciation, acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. As she left the stage, Maria was waiting in the wings, tears streaming down her face. "Perfection," she whispered, hugging Sophia tightly. The rest of the showcase passed in a blur. Sophia watched the other fellows perform, applauded their accomplishments, but her mind was still on the stage, still feeling the music flowing through her. After the performance, a small reception was held for the performers and special guests. Sophia found herself surrounded by well-wishers, fellow musicians, critics, people from the music industry eager to introduce themselves. "Ms. Reyes," a distinguished older man said, extending his hand. "Thomas Wayland from Symphony Records. We should talk about your future." Sophia smiled and took his card, promising to call. 3 other similar conversations followed, people who had heard her play and seen something worth investing in. Eventually, she broke away from the crowd and found her way to where Gabriela waited with Mrs. Alvarez and her other supporters. "You are amazing," Gabriela said, hugging her tightly. "I've never been so proud." "Indeed," agreed Mrs. Alvarez, wiping tears from her eyes. "Your parents would be bursting with joy if they could see you tonight." Sophia felt her own eyes fill with tears. "I thought about them the whole time I was playing," she admitted. "I felt like they were there somehow." "They were," Gabriela said softly. "They are." Maxwell approached, champagne flute in hand. "If I may interrupt this family moment to offer my congratulations?" He smiled warmly at Sophia. "You exceeded all expectations tonight." "I had good teachers," Sophia replied, "and good friends." She included him in her gaze, acknowledging the role he had played in her journey. "Speaking of which," Maxwell said, "there's someone I'd like you to meet." He gestured to a woman standing nearby. "This is Catherine Liu, director of the Community Music Works program, the one you donated to after the party." Sophia's eyes widened. The very program that had given her her first lessons as a child. Catherine stepped forward, her expression warm. "Ms. Reyes, your performance tonight was exquisite. Mr. Stone has told me your story, and I must say, it resonates deeply with our mission." "Your program changed my life," Sophia said simply. "Without those early lessons." "And now you're changing lives in return," Catherine replied. "Mr. Stone has established a scholarship fund in your name, the Sophia Reyes Fellowship for Young Musicians. It will cover not just lessons, but living expenses for talented children from underprivileged backgrounds. Children just like you were." Sophia turned to Maxwell in shock. "You did what?" He shrugged, almost embarrassed. "It seemed fitting. A way to complete the circle." "The first recipient has already been selected," Catherine continued. "A 12-year-old, girl from Queens with extraordinary potential but limited means. Would you be willing to meet with her? Perhaps become a mentor of sorts?" Sophia thought about her own childhood, about the teachers who had believed in her, about the community that had supported her journey. "I'd be honored," she said. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the concert hall had emptied, Sophia found herself alone on the stage once more. She sat at the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. So much had changed in 6 months. She was still working at Bellini's on weekends. The fellowship stipend wasn't enough to live on yet, but her path had shifted dramatically. There were recording offers to consider, future performances to plan, a young girl to mentor. Sophia played a few quiet notes, enjoying the perfect acoustics of the empty hall. The sound reminded her of